Okay, this is a topic that I think is of a prime importance to this nation, is education. Probably a lot of people are aware now that Australia has dropped in the ranks in education globally since about the year 2000 in the crucial areas of science, mathematics and reading. I mean, they're pretty basic skills. And I find that very disturbing. It's probably the minority of teachers that allowed their classes to run right like that. But it was still a shock to me that in a private school where the parents are paying big bucks to give their kids a good education, it still happened. So the discipline aspect of my education was compromised to some degree with certain subjects. But I had an excellent economics teacher, and he was very good. I learned a lot more about economics at that level in Form 6 than I ever did at university, because I went and did economics at university, at La Trobe University, and I'm quite comfortable in saying that it was a really crappy course. I didn't really learn anything there, and there's a lot, in my opinion, that was a waste of public money, and God knows what the humanities and social science courses were like. I mean, if economics was suspect, well, one could only imagine. I am very cynical about academics getting involved in areas like nursing, making that a university course. I don't think that's a need. There's a need for that, and it's a waste of resources, in my opinion. A lot more people should be doing tech courses. They shouldn't have to be going through schools, but the politicians just keep pushing and pushing and pushing this. And then you have that Gonski fiasco and Gillard or education revolution, just slogans, And ever since you came up with that garbage, of course, we've demonstrably downhill when it comes to our performance in education globally. It's just pathetic. There's so much PC stuff in the curriculum that gender ID studies and all this sort of crap, which I think is total crap. And I mean, really, I think the education departments in the States and in Australia have got a lot to answer for, and the federal government getting involved in education, they should just stay out of it, and basically, but also all they should do is make sure that that the curriculum shouldn't be bastardized like this, which is actually, it makes perfect sense why why we're doing so poorly in these tests internationally, because we've degraded our education system. You've got to get back to the basics. Look, I hated going to school, to be honest with you, and I'll be quite frank, I hated rote learning. I'm more a creative person, so I'd be a hypocrite if I said I like that stuff, but just because I didn't like it doesn't mean it's not important to do. I'm not necessarily saying about having to learn your times tables, although I think there's some validity in that, but certainly I think we need to put a lot more emphasis on the basics of arithmetic, English, basic English expression and what have you. These skills need to be learnt, and we're just basically turning out a lot of semi-illiterate students. They're semi-illiterate going to university. It's embarrassing. And what they're doing now is, rather than improving the education of the kids, and as I say, that requires getting better teachers. But now we're getting more political teachers. Some of the politics that's shoved down the throats of the kids, green type politics, anti conservative politics. It's just really, it's disgraceful. It shouldn't be a place for indoctrination. It should be a place for education. But unfortunately, the pendulum now has switched to the indoctrination. And now I see I've come in contact with a few people in, say, their 20s. And, I can see the ones that have been affected by the green mantra. I mean, it's been hammered home to them continually. They showed Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth as part of the curriculum, but there was no counterbalance to it, of course. That would be just, we're not going to have that, are we? And I remember I knew a teacher who actually admitted that he had a discussion about what was the pros and cons of the Btw Peterson regime in Queensland, and he could come up with no pros, and he just left it at that in the class. His job was actually to find out why people voted for Btw. That's what education's about. That's what research is about, to find out why these things occurred. You don't have to agree with them, but you do need to at least discuss it. But of course, in his classrooms, he felt it was quite appropriate to basically just leave it as total negatives, and that obviously the Queenslanders were all idiots for voting for a Conservative government without any examination of what their motivation for voting for that government was. I mean, it's just that if that's what we call education these days, is it any wonder we're in trouble? Seriously. I mean, a good teacher would at least try to find a balance. They don't have to agree with it, but they should be going in there trying to teach kids to look at things critically. There's always two sides to arguments. And I'm not so arrogant to think that I've got all the clues. I'm happy to have a discussion with someone. I respect someone who was prepared to have a real debate and not just shout down people. And the big story for me is in Australia, and not just Australia, in the West in general, we've got to really get our act together. We've slipped below. Of course, we're below New Zealand. We seem to be below New Zealand in everything. New Zealand aren't doing brilliantly, but they're doing better than us. The star performer, of course, in our region, well, not just our region, I think actually overall, is actually Singapore. And I bet you they've got much better classroom discipline and probably a lot better motivation. Because it's primarily a Chinese-based population there now. The Malays and the Indian population is reduced quite a bit, and there's been a huge inflow of Chinese immigrants from mainland China, and these are well-heeled immigrants, and of course, being well-heeled, they're going to be very motivated with their kids to do well as well, and they're going to have the resources, of course, the money and what have you. So I guess it makes sense that Singapore would be doing pretty well, given that they've got such a motivated student body. And as I say, I'm sure they'd be much better disciplined. They don't seem to be falling for all this left-wing rubbish that a lot of students in the Western universities think it's like a rite of passage that they can label themselves as Stalinists or Maoists or Spartacists or God knows what. I never understood that. I mean, when I went to uni, even back when I went, I mean, that was back in the 70s. That's how long ago. They were doing all that crap, and I thought, no, well, this is just university. Surely this is not going to translate into the real world. But I'm sorry to say it does, and it has. And Australia, we are not doing too well. I mean, science, maths, and reading, they're really fundamental skills, really important skills that we need if we want to go further. And I mean, I think it's also very sad that we don't have, we're not doing very well in science and technology. Apart from medical research, I think Australia's really doing really abysmally when it comes to some of the high-tech sciences. Of course, we've virtually banned nuclear science in Australia because we're not going to allow a nuclear power station, even though it's the greenest form of energy we could have with baseload power. We're not going to have that, which would have that flow-on effect of creating a demand for skilled people in that area. The other area we've totally ignored is space. We have absolutely no presence in space at all. We don't have a launch pad, to my knowledge. If we were forward-looking, you'd hope that a company like BHP Billiton, the biggest mining company in the world, would actually look at the possibility of mining asteroids and the like, and maybe looking into into industrialisation of space as a way of expanding their horizons and morphing into a high-tech mining company that's not just doing mining but also maybe involved in space industry as well. We need to do these things, in my opinion. But no, we would rather, say, get a bloated NBN and waste billions of dollars on something like that, or waste money on billions of dollars again on diesel plants that are all sitting mothballed. And I think we can thank the Greens for that one. It's just really sad. I just wish a bit of common sense would come back to this country. And the first way we could maybe improve things is to get those education departments doing the right thing and getting back to basics and getting our kids to learn important vocational skills when they're and life skills when they're actually at school, rather than a whole lot of politically correct garbage. That's what we've got to do. We just got to focus in on the basics. It's not rocket science, but you'd think it was the way our politicians talk. They just don't get it. They just keep clinging to this Gonski type mantra. It's pathetic. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.